I feel lucky today because I have the honor and privilege of introducing to you guys, to you listeners who have waited patiently for this, Eisner Award winning writer of, let me see if I can do this off the top. Let me see. Blue and Green, The Many Deaths of Lila Starr, Dawn Runner, Rare Flavors, Detective Comics, Catwoman, The Swamp Thing, The One Hand, Radio Apocalypse. Can I get one more? Oh, can I get one more? Help me, Tyler.
Marvel.
Right.
Yes, Carnage.
There it
Carnage.
is.
Boom. Boom. 10. We are joined by Ram V. Welcome, Ram.
Pleasure to be joining you all again.
Yes, absolutely. This is I want to say the third time we've been lucky enough to have
Yes,
Ram
yeah.
on. Yeah. And what I love about your career, because when we first spoke to you, I think your biggest book was The Swamp Thing. And every time that we speak with you, it's like things just get bigger and better. And now, you have so many books. I just rattled off a catalog that I think any writer would be proud of.
And you missed These Savage Shores.
And I missed These Savage Shores and The Vigil, right?
Yes.
So, and I feel like it's still the tip of the iceberg somehow. That's the crazy part.
Yeah, no, I mean, comics have been good and are a wonderful outlet for my need to just be like, okay, what am I doing next? I think that's been like the running theme. I always talk to people and they're like, how do you feel when a book releases? I'm like, okay, because I'm already working on the next thing, and that's the thing I'm the most excited about. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the perfect outlet for someone like me, and I think these past couple of years, I've been doing stuff outside of comics as well, and that seems to be sort of picking up pace in a similar way. So fingers crossed, a couple of years from now, we'll be talking about other things beyond comics too.
Does it ever become difficult for you, being a person who's so excited about the next project, to embrace and enjoy what is currently on the stands and what people are talking about as it relates to you now?
I mean, I wouldn't say embrace and enjoy, because my enjoyment is quite literally out of just sitting down to make things. So I've never been the kind of person to derive enjoyment out of like, hey, people are talking about this book. And I get that. Sometimes my collaborators sort of will despair with me when they'll go like, man, this book is so big. We should go out. We should be going out and talking to people about it. And we should be on shows and we should do gallery showings and stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, but I just kind of want to work on my next book. Um, and sometimes that leads to frustration. It's like, wow, why are you so disinterested in this book? It's doing well. I'm like, it's not like I'm disinterested. It's just that I'm more interested in something else.
Yeah, it's not that you're disinterested. You wrote it. You did your part.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like it is quite literally that. Like the I used to have these discussions with Ryan O'Sullivan, who was part of the White Noise Studio, and I used to always say there's two kinds of writers, and I imagine the same applies to any other kind of creatives. There are people who are in love with writing, and there are people who are in love with the idea of being a writer. And for me, the idea of being a writer is so far outside of just me being in love with writing stuff, that, yeah, all of it feels like byproduct of just putting my head down and being excited about the next thing. So
That's more than reasonable. And I think based on where we are at right now in this moment of time, as we speak to you, San Diego Comic-Con is 2 weeks out.
yeah,
And when you talk about the future, it feels like the future is very bright on your side of things, because without you being able to say anything, I have a very good feeling that we're going to know about some new Rom V books on the other side of San Diego Comic-Con, which is
oh
super.
yeah. I mean, there's certainly a fairly large DC announcement coming, which will be the book that takes up most of my time past detective. So that will be my sort of mainstream continuing book, if you will. And I've got another project at DC, which is a more obscure character, which I've already been working on, which is probably going to be more of a Black Label book. So I imagine that announcement will come on the other side, but maybe another month or two down the line. And then there's the Distillery stuff, of which the book with Joel is already announced, called Through Red Windows. But there's another book I'm doing with Lee Garbett, which will probably be announced further down the line. There's another book I'm supposed to be doing with Tula Lotay, which is probably even further down the line. But yeah.
Wow.
Usually we hear about comics being like an uphill battle trying to, put stuff out there, but you're like, it's like a snowball rolling downhill for you. Like it's just so much and so much momentum.
I mean, also like I think I was talking to Jorge. So I'm doing a book with Jorge Fornes as well, which is way too early to announce anything. But he was like, "Bram, where are we going to publish this?" And I was in a very fortunate position to tell him, like, let's not worry about that. Let's just start making the book, and then when we have enough of the book made, we can be like, "Hey, everyone, Jorge and I are making this book," and then we will be in a position to go like, cool, like these publishers want our book and let's pick one. So I think when you're starting out in comics, it is very much an uphill battle because you have to work hard for publishers to pay attention to you. But I think when you're in a position where you're published with a few publishers and there's a certain expectation of quality that goes with your work, I think publishers want to know what you're working on next so that they can publish it. So I think being in that place is quite nice.
A little freeing.
Yeah, like you don't, you're not, I guess you're putting less time about working on a pitch than you are putting into just working on the book, because the book is the pitch at this point. Yeah.
Well, I want to say that Through Red Windows #1, which is Rom's collaboration with Joel Jones through Distillery, is hitting FOC actually in 2 days. Final order cutoff is on July 15th. So if you guys want to go request that from your local comic book shop, I suspect that that would be a really good decision. And what I love about this collaboration too is that you and Joelle actually share something in common, which is your work on Catwoman.
Yeah, I quite literally picked up from her run. I think my first issue was quite literally the ending to Joelle's run, or like a coda to Joelle's run. But also even before then, like I've been a massive fan of her work on Lady Killer, which is one of my sort of favorite reads from her and Jamie Rich's collaborations. And so, yeah, I'd always wanted to work with someone of that caliber. And when we were talking about this book, she was like, what kind of book is it? And I said, it's got contemporary horror, but it's also Edgar Allan Poe, but it's also like, I don't know, Hereditary and Succession and Channel Zero kind of vibes to it. And then she was like, yeah, all of those things, like just hearing those points of reference is like, yes, I'm sold on whatever this is going to be. So I think Joelle doing like a gloomy contemporary but gothic noir horror story is going to look amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that is very, very exciting. I've been patiently waiting for your at bat as far as Distillery. And so the fact that it's you teaming with Joel Jones, I really don't think I could be more excited. That's very cool.
Yeah, thank you. And it's definitely the first time I've returned to doing something that feels a lot closer in tone to something like Blue and Green. So it's kind of exciting to be back in that space. Yeah, just kind of unsettling horror rather than the sort of gore or like visual jump scares, just the kind of horror that creeps up on you over pages as you read.
Very tantalizing. Our live audience is trying to take a guess at what DC obscure character you're going to be working on.
I know. So I've tweeted about this like 3 times and probably had 500 replies in total, out of which I think 2 people got it right ever. So, and one of those was not even like a person who responded to a tweet. One of those was someone I was talking to on a podcast, and post podcast they were like, "Can I take a guess?" And so yeah, well,
Did
I'll
you?
say this:
Yeah.
when I first pitched it, the editors at one of the editors who was listening to the pitch at DC went, "Who? Do we even have that character?" So
Oh, wow.
So the likelihood of guessing is very low, basically.
yeah, I mean, I haven't seen your live audience guessing, but yeah, yeah. If you want to intermittently toss some at me, we'll see. But I'm not gonna confirm or deny.
We'll have to watch your body language.
A little twitch.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared some pages from it on Twitter, so but I don't think anyone's guessed off of that either.
Well, I want to say that today we are going to be doing a giveaway of one of Rom's books. So for a live audience member, there will come a time a little bit later on where we're going to tell you now's the time for the giveaway, and we're going to ask you to put something in the chat, and then that's going to enter you in, and then whatever volume 1 or collected edition of any of Rom's books that you want, the winner will receive one of those courtesy of us. We
Hey,
want
that's
to get,
fantastic.
yes, absolutely. We love what you do. We want to get more people into the fold. And sometimes all it takes is that little push. So that's what we're going to do a little later on today. And also, if you will indulge me for a quick moment, I do want to celebrate our patrons who are very supportive of ours and sponsor this show essentially. So I want to give a special shout out to the best pals in the universe: Thunderstruck Rebecca Alejandro, the Hound of Justice Atomic Hound, Starcross Catherine Stars, and the Red Spiral Spiral Storm. And I also want to thank the Night Stalker Harris Dajinski, Brian Demolisher Del Pozo, Kefis the Incorruptible, Momentum Mike Elliott, Dan the Truth Trudeau, Jalen the Sanguine Sorcerer, Marley Manistorm, Slow Flow Dameron, Christian Uncaged Harriet, Always Laughing, the Spear of Justice, Izzy's Issues, the Great Destroyer, Hyper Viper 89, Adam and Bernie the Best Boy, Robert Runback Cashaback, Pete the Dreamweaver Collins, Matthew Malice Price, James Just Jamming Jones, Amin Almighty Perez, and Paul Powerhouse Smith, and Andrew Smith, who is joining us for the first time this week. Thank you all so, so much. If you would like your own superhero and supervillain nickname, patreon.com/thecomicspals is the way to get that. Thank you all so much.
Well, Rom, it was nice to see you. If you have to go now, we understand.
I'll see you
If
later.
there's anything you want to plug,
I
Well,
wanted to.
we still have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
so
Well,
generous.
If it keeps going the way it's been, the whole show will be dedicated to those shout outs. So thank you all
Oh
very
yes,
much.
no,
for
no.
that.
I'm glad that you're getting all the support, and I love the nicknames. So
Thank
keep
you.
them coming.
Thank you so much.
Hey, yeah, keep them coming.
Thank you a lot. So I wanna really kick off with Detective Comics. I feel like I've been in a bat cave of my own, diving in to Detective the second half really of this run. And it's been so incredible. And it feels like such an epic. That's the word that comes to mind, like trying to describe it. It feels like you've really taken Batman on a journey. And one of the things that I love so much about what you do, and it's really evident in the DC stuff, particularly with Swamp Thing and Vigil and Detective, is that you do it's okay, it's Batman, right? It's Batman, but it's not your run of the mill without discrediting anybody else. It's not your run of the mill run on Batman. It brings in elements that you haven't necessarily ever seen in Batman before. And I love that about it. It has what I consider to be like the Rom V flavor of expect the unexpected. You don't know what you're going to get. You think you do because you see Batman, but it ends up being something completely different. And then you're playing with characters that a lot of times are not necessarily seen in some of the Batman stories. Like the fact that you got Jason Sean Alexander to draw Azrael,
Hell
I
yeah.
felt like I was going to crawl up the wall with how cool that was. So I really just want to celebrate, man, how incredible this run has been. When you set out to tell a story with Batman, was your desire to, do something radical, or did that just come when you sat down to think about the character?
I mean, radical is a very sort of reader's perspective thing, right? Like as a creator, I believe in being ambitious to a point where some of my pitches have like the reaction I've had face to face pitching it to editors or to people at the top of the company has quite literally been them going, "That's ambitious," and some small part of me always goes like, "Yes, why wouldn't it be?" Like that's the whole point. Like, I mean, why would you set out to tell an unambitious story? Um, and so I think part of the thing with my stories is that to me ambition is doing something new with the character, even when people come and say, "Oh, this character's been around for 50, 60, 70 years." um there's nothing original left to do, and my response always is like, no, because your idea of originality is skewed. Do you think originality means you have to do something that is immediately recognizable as being new, whereas originality can mean taking absolutely the same story you've come to expect every time, and then about halfway through you go, wait a minute, I've never seen it done like this. And I think there's a joy to that. Like, I don't think any of the Tim Burton Batman movies plot wise are doing anything that hasn't been done in the comics, but that was such an ambitious new sort of take on Batman that it defined Batman for an entire generation or two to come after it. So I think also part of the reason, I feel this way about my story certainly is I didn't come into DC or Marvel off of years of trying to get stories at DC or Marvel. Like I made my first book in 2016, and then 2018, I was talking to DC about doing something at Vertigo. And so my whole approach with the DC Marvel stuff was that I'm here because of what I do, not because of what I'm expected to do. And so my endeavor is always, regardless of whether the character is this sort of big Batman iconic figure or the soon to come most obscure character ever figure, I have to do something that is me. It has to be Ram's take on Batman. It has to be Ram's take on this other character. And so I kind of philosophically have this disagreement with this idea that the characters are bigger than the creators. Like, no, no, no. Like when I say I love Batman, while I appreciate Bob Kane and Bill Finger's work on Batman, the Batman I love comes from probably a product of Frank Miller, probably a product of Tim Burton, probably a product of to a lesser extent maybe Loeb and Sale as well. And so you realize for every generation of person who says they love Batman, they love a creator's take on Batman, is what the truth is. And so why would you ever get into this process without ever going, at some point, I want to have my take on this character?
That is a tremendous point. That is a tremendous point. There's probably nobody alive whose only familiarity with Batman is that very initial version.
Yeah, I think that is the reason. I don't mean that in a combative way. That is quite literally the reason these characters live on for 80, 90, 100 years and beyond. That's how mythology works. Someone writes the first story about the Titans, and people are kind of wowed, and then somewhere hundreds of years later on, somebody wants to write about an average human being becoming a god, and they say, I'm going to write the story of Hercules. And then all of a sudden it revitalizes every great mythological character since pre-Hercules who's shown up there. And I think that kind of revisionism and constant retelling of a story, but set to a new time, set to a new people, is the lifeblood of things like superhero comics, like mythology. And so Yeah, you really, as a creator, my advice would really be like, you should be having a take on these characters. You should come to these characters because you have something to do that is uniquely coming from you.
And yeah, you've always managed to do that.
With
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, you can't control the success of these things, but you can certainly control what you bring to the table. So,
And when you say have a take, is that like you have something to say with the character, you have opinion about the character, or are you trying to view something through that character's eyes? Like, what does that mean?
I just mean to say something that excites you about the character that feels like it excites you for reasons that are inherent to what you appreciate. It doesn't have to be that you have something to say, because not all stories are meant to have anything to say. Like sometimes good stories don't have to say anything. They just have to exist. But I think it's important to say, okay, I've never seen Batman done in this aesthetic, and I think this aesthetic is something that brings something new to the character. And so maybe it's the aesthetic that you're bringing to the story, or you can say, I've never seen Batman's character treated in this way. For instance, part of my take is I've in all the time that I have read Batman, his journey has always been towards this place of being this kind of centrist vigilante, which is an inherently conflicting position in my head. Like if he's a vigilante, there's no way he's a centrist, and the center should hate him for being a vigilante. And so part of this run has been pushing towards the idea as a rebelling Batman, a Batman who is no longer seen as a centrist, hence the death and rebirth, hence the erasure of Batman's memory. Um, because you should 100% have a statue of Superman in your plaza if your city's been saved by Superman. You should never have a statue of Batman in your plaza if Batman's done well in saving your city. So that has been my point of view, and that is a take that I think I bring to this run. And so it can be something like that, which you don't ever have to expressively say through the story.
And you've been playing around a lot with the idea of Bruce as a completely human person who has created a myth that is bigger than him.
Yeah.
And the idea that the myth needs things that the human does not. And people oftentimes play with the idea that, Bruce is the mask and Batman is the real person. And I don't feel like you're going in that direction. It seems to me more the idea that in order for Bruce's mission with Batman to succeed, Batman quite literally has to become something more than just a guy in a costume.
Yeah.
And that is in essence a control of the way people think about Batman. It's the mythological creation, myth creation.
Sure.
And then on the other side of that, you have the Orgums who are kind of like playing with the idea that you can kill that. You can get rid of that. And that they can take the power away from Batman in a way that no other villain really tries, which is to kill the myth. Everybody tries to kill the man. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Kill the
Yeah.
myth, and you can beat Batman. And I thought that was an interesting wrinkle in the concept.
Yeah, and it also kind of ties into how if your initial presumption is that Batman is a real person, right? Real within context of this narrative, but real meaning he has no powers, he's the average human being, who's maybe trained really hard and has a lot of resources at his disposal, but for all other factual purposes, he is just like you and me, a human being. And in that context, if you look at people and then translate that to our world in terms of, okay, which human being transcended the idea of being a human being and became a myth, then you start getting figures like Gandhi, like Che Guevara, like these guys who exceeded the bounds of just a human being walking around, right? And you realize that is why you have to become myth if you're going to inspire thousands of hundreds of thousands of people to do things, as long as your name is attached to them. And so I began thinking of Batman as that kind of character, and I said, okay, cool, how would I kill this kind of character? and you realize that the human being is besides the point. It doesn't matter who Che Guevara is. What really matters is killing the myth of Che Guevara, if you were so inclined, if you will. And so these villains set about doing that. They set about going, okay, Gotham lives on, and it is this kind of hobbled, terrible city because it has all of these myths, and the greatest of these myths is Batman. And so if we can make Gotham forget about Batman, then Gotham will forget about these other myths that rule her night, and it can become a much more productive, lucrative, profitable city for us to be at the head of. Um, it also poses an interesting question in terms of the character, right? So if you're a human being and you realize that you're being followed by whatever number of people because of your myth, or people act a certain way because of your myth, at some point you start needing, the question is, do you really need the myth as well? Like, why haven't you given up when your bones started hurting? Why haven't you given up when you lost friends to this, to perpetuating this myth? And so the question becomes, do you need the myth, or does the myth need you? And I think that became an interesting question to look at. And then beyond that is, okay, if we say there is this codependent relationship, then what are you giving the myth that it chooses to stay with you? Became another follow-up question. And so I've always kind of pushed away from this idea that Batman is doing this to overcome the darkness of his past or the trauma of his past. No, Batman is doing this, to my mind, because this is his coping mechanism. He is coping, and therefore it will never go away. The trauma of his past is Batman. So yeah, that's kind of what led to this whole myth versus human presentation in the story.
And I love the piece where, you know, Batman is in this sort of in between place, and he speaks with Dr. Hurt, a character that I absolutely love from the Morrison era that is terribly underutilized. I was so grateful that you picked up on him. And then what Dan Waters did in the backups was crazy. Oh my goodness. But you touched on this idea of, which I was so happy to see, that Bruce is sort of at peace with his life. He's not sort of like doing this out of a sense of trauma. He's doing this because there's a bigger need. There's something that has to be accomplished. And, you know, it's like Batman needs to win. Batman needs to be seen a certain way. Bruce is okay. And I love that. I think that is exactly the message that needed to be sent out with Batman. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, and also I think it's much more reaffirming to me on a personal level, but also I imagine to a lot of people on a personal level, because this idea that anyone who's ever been through anything difficult or traumatic has to go through this process of weird self-improvement until they can get to a place where they're like, yep, I'm no longer affected by this thing that happened to me, is for the birds. That never happens. Like, you're going to be, if you've gone through really something terrible in your past, then you're going to be 60, 65, 70. You're still going to wake up on days and go like, man, that thing still affects me. And you deal with it. Doesn't mean you're broken in any way. It doesn't mean you have faltered in any way. It just means that it's something that you carry. And we all carry these things with us. And to be constantly told by essentially a form of aspirational storytelling in some ways that you have to overcome this, you have to become this purified, perfect human, is I think, the wrong message. I think the right message is, yep, this is something you're going to carry all your life, but it's okay. You don't have to let it define you.
Man, that is such a wrinkle in the lineage and legacy of the Batman character that allows it to exist in the same space as Morrison and Miller, but in a slightly different way. It's like it's making a different point from the Bat God or some of the other stuff that we have gotten. And I think it's just as valid, and I think just as necessary. I think if you haven't read Detective Comics and this conversation is interesting to you, these are the themes that are at play. and I highly recommend you give it a shot. It's awesome. And not only does it have all this cool, philosophical stuff, but it also has Mr. Freeze. And some of
Yes,
the
my
best,
favorite Bat villain.
I know that. I can tell that because the dialogue is pitch fucking perfect. It's been amazing to read your Mr. Freeze. Have you had a lot of fun being able to go into Batman's Rogues Gallery and his Ally Gallery and sort of play with the characters that you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I know people are like, oh man, there's more of Batman villains in this story than Batman. And that's a fair point. But I don't necessarily think that's criticism because to me, like, yes, of course there is, because this is a Batman story and Batman is defined as much as his own views of himself, Gotham's views of him, but probably even more defined by the villain's view of who he is. And that has always been the case. So I would argue that a Batman story is not complete unless it has a fairly compelling rogues gallery there. And yeah, these are largely have been all of my favorite Bat villains that I've been able to bring into this. In fact, when I first started off, one of the sort of notes I had from the editors were like, well, the main run is going to be using these sort of big villains, and we don't want too many repeating notes in both the books. So unfortunately, these guys, A, B, C, D, are off the plate. And I was like, there's no Mr. Freeze in that list. There's no Two-Face in that. Great. I think we're good. Um, and so, yeah, I will gladly take all the toys nobody else wants.
I mean, it was nice to see Solomon Grundy as well show up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Grundy's there. I was really glad to be able to bring Talia as well. I think, yeah, just because also people don't realize that this is such a sort of banal viewpoint to take. Like people think like, oh, Ram, why did you choose Talia? I mean, quite literally because I realized that the Batman Catwoman relationship is something that is in focus and in view in the main book. And so because I had this mandate of like, you need to use characters that aren't necessarily in the main book too much, I went, okay, cool, I'll take another love interest.
And I think it worked out narratively really well, being able to
Yeah,
integrate
yeah,
her into the
yeah. And I think it was quite definitive also. Once I knew that, then I knew that Talia was my angle into the whole sort of the myth of Batman thing, because the myth of Batman is so heavily tied into the whole Ra's al Ghul history, being trained and all of that. So taking the idea of the myth being resolved back in the desert, back where he became Batman in some ways, um, just seemed like a good story point to take.
I should say our chat is going nuts over what you just said regarding how you don't need to be defined by your trauma. Everybody is thanking you. Someone said they're firing their therapist and hiring you. So if you want another career as a therapist, Ram, it is available to you.
I mean, technically, what every good writer like. I don't know who did this, but someone was asked like, if someone wants is aspiring to be a good writer, um, what would you recommend they read? And I can't remember who it was, but the writer in question responded with, throw out all your novels and all your fiction and just go read some philosophy and psychology. And so, yeah, I mean, I think part of it is writing in itself is such an introspective thing to do. You start thinking about why are we this way, and then you form your opinions. And that's not necessarily to say I'm right, but that's not necessarily to say anybody else is right either. So that's the beauty of the human condition, right? You're all discovering stuff about yourself as you go through life, and maybe have some truths to share.
Well, here's a truth that I want to share. You worked with a murderer's row of artists on Detective. I mean, just a few names. Jason Sean Alexander, who did such incredible work.
Yeah,
Mike
I think he
Perkins.
was, yeah. No, I think Jason was phenomenal, and I will 100% take credit for it because right at the beginning of Detective, we were actually having trouble finding the right artists for the book, just because it came together in a very semi haphazard way. Um, Like we didn't know it was going to be Rafa taking on the first arc of the book until like literally 2 weeks before the book was supposed to be drawn. So Jason, on the other hand, was someone I went to the editors with, and I said, I need to have 3 or 4 issues with Jason Sean Alexander. I don't need any interruptions. We'll lay it out beforehand and work with him. And yeah, fortunately the schedules aligned and Jason was available, and we were able to do pretty much the entire Outlaw arc.
So the list of artists that you worked with is so long, and there were times where, you know, you had a couple of artists in the same issue, and
Yeah.
sometimes where you'd go. So like, what were the positive elements of working that way? And if you are comfortable, were there any downsides to working that way?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is part of the reality of functioning within the sort of monthly big two comic space, right? Um, Sometimes artists are going to go, oh, I can't hit this deadline, or I've got something that's come up, but the book still needs to be made. Like if it was a creator-owned book, you could say, cool, we'll delay this issue by a month and it will be fine. But that's not going to happen, and so you do get curveballs thrown at you in terms of like, okay, the next 2 issues, we're going to have to pull someone in the last moment. And it's always a little bit of a pity when that happens, because certainly the way I work is I really don't have a problem with like who the artist is going to be. Like I can work with a lot of different styles. I just need to know beforehand that is going to be this person. And so when I script for that artist. And so a positive example of that is the issues with Riccardo Federici and Stefano Raphael. Like we knew beforehand that Ricardo was only going to be able to do a certain number of pages. And so it wouldn't be the entire 24-page issue. And because we knew that, we could say, great, in which case I'm going to do this question crime noir thing that's going on in Gotham at the same time as Batman is in the desert. And they will talk to each other, but we could totally have 2 different art styles in those issues. And so that is something, as long as it's something by design, the control freak in me is like, it's cool. If it's something that is not by design, I'm like, man, if it would have been so much better if I could have controlled it. So yeah, but largely like working with Rafa, working with Ivan Reis, working with Jason again, like these have for the most part all been planned beforehand, and I'm glad they worked out that way. I think especially I don't think enough people realize it, maybe because we were too subtle with it, but the Two-Face issue with Rafa and Ivan Reis, I don't think people realize that the entire thing is fractally a mirror image of itself. And so the center, the middle of the issue is a splash page that on the left was drawn by Ivan and inked by Rafa. On the right was drawn by Rafa and inked by Ivan. And then if you look at the pages, like every spread, the panel layouts are mirror images of each other. So what's on the left is mirrored on the right constantly. The first half of the issue is essentially bad or evil Two-Face's narration. The second half of the issue is essentially Harvey's narration. And then the opening line of the book mirrors the ending line of the book. So being able to do stuff like that because you've planned ahead is quite insane. Yeah, so hopefully one day someone will pick up that issue and go like, wait, what is that stuff, that panel layouts again? But yeah, I think that was a really, really fun thing to be able to do.
You know how people always say, like, with enough preparation, like Batman could take on anyone, right? Are you Batman?
Dun, dun, dun. I mean, technically I work out of a cave. Technically, my wife brings me tea and biscuits when I'm
Careful
working
with that
late
one.
in the cave. Technically, I do not have a rogues gallery. But otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of crossover.
Wow.
And we've never seen and Batman in the same place. So
Dun, dun, dun. I need to start wearing a costume.
Hey, you are going to San Diego Comic-Con. Perfect time to cosplay.
I need to start. Actually, I need to start answering my editors in the gruff Christian Bale voice. Like, Ram, this book is running late. Why?
Sorry, we don't have Gillum for this issue. Where is he?
Cale, can you read off the listener question for the Batman portion, please?
Yeah, you got it. This is from Atomic Hound. Was there anything new that you learned about the essence or mythos of Batman after writing 20 plus issues? You already gave a lot of gold, but Hound's always digging.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I looked at it as learning, but I definitely would say I have more to say about Batman at the end of the detective run than I had to say at the beginning, which is always a nice feeling to have, where you've written something and you've kind of had your take on it, but at the end of it, you're left with, oh wait, I have 3 other takes that I definitely want to do at some point. And that's always a sign of a character who is very iconic, because you've now imagined 3 other stories that didn't exist before.
Thanks for the question, Atomic Hound. I love Detective Comics. I'm very excited to see how you're going to resolve it. It has been a very, 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 like, how do I express this? I feel like mainline Batman is very good, and it's always going to give me what I want and what I expect out of Batman. Your run on Detective has thrown curveballs and has challenged me and my thought process about the character and been illuminating. And I'm really thankful for that, because Batman is important to me. And each iteration of Batman that I love does those things. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Thank you for bringing horror to Batman. Thank you for bringing Talia back in a meaningful way. Like, you did a lot of really awesome things with Detective, and I hope that it's hit you that this was a special run.
Yeah, I mean, look, when this run started out, there was this kind of euphoria of like, hey, we're gonna see something cool and new. And then after the first couple of issues came out, there was this wave of people going like, oh, this is unexpected. I'm not sure I'm into this. And then somewhere around issue 5 or 6 coming out, all of those people started going, wait a minute, there's something interesting happening here. And that to me is a sign of a good story. So I've had the same thing with my Swamp Thing run. When it first came out, people started going like, it's not my Swamp Thing. Alex Holland is not here. What the hell? And then about 6 issues in, people were like, wait a minute, this is actually good. And I kind of take encouragement from that in this kind of perverse way, where I'm like, when I see a comment or a review that comes out and they're like, this is not my thing, and I was like, haha, just you wait 4 issues down the line, my friend. But I also understand that my stories are for people who read and appreciate things like me, and that's not, I don't represent the vast majority of readership. Like, I can't stand the sort of, if it feels like this is something I've already seen, my brain just switches off. Whereas even if it's something that is bizarre and flawed, but it feels like, oh, this is actually trying to do things that I haven't seen before, I will stick with it. And so my stories tend to be also for people who have the patience to stick with it in some ways. But you can't expect that of everyone. And so I think the most reaffirming thing I've seen during this detective run is the people who initially naysayed and then came back after 2 trades were out to go like, wow, this is actually doing something new. That kind of converting the viewpoint from initial skepticism to appreciation, to me, always feels great. So very, very appreciative of people who've had the patience and who've kind of put in the work almost to engage with it, because it does. I'm fully aware of the fact that most of my stories ask the reader to do a little bit of work, and hopefully not too much. But yeah, and I love reading stories like that. I love doing a little bit of work. So
Yeah, as we've coined for you here on the show, let you cook, let him cook. You know, it'll get
Yeah,
there
yeah.
and be
And
really good.
I feel like I I had this kind of pivotal change in the way I appreciated stories when I was about 19, 20, and I'd moved to the States, and I met this friend who really introduced me to movies that will do your head in, or books that you read and it's just bizarre, but will challenge you in interesting ways. The thing I found that once I started reading those things, it was very hard for me to go back and watch a run of the mill sort of action flick and go like, yes, I watched them. Don't try. I mean, I've seen The Equalizer more times than I can count, but um, I'm not watching it to go like, this is brilliant cinema. So I think the more you become like that, the more your output also starts becoming like that. And I hadn't envisioned myself as a writer at that point in time. So when I did start writing, it was all stuff that was like, I'm going to do those same cool, weird things that I felt when I was watching these things for the first time.
You've really, over the last couple years, I would say, gone wide in terms of your output. Getting away from the big two. Which before that, actually, I did want to make a
Yeah.
quick comment on the Vigil, which is phenomenal. The Vigil was
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
But outside of the big two, you've done Rare Flavors, which is fantastic. I love that book because every time I'm reading it, I go, shit, this brings a new level to Let Rom Cook. Like this is a whole other level of that.
Meta Let Rom Cook. Yeah.
But then there's also Dawn Runner, right? And then
Yeah.
there's this channel's favorite, The One Hand.
Sure. Yeah.
Every month, The One Hand comes out. We get on this podcast and we are racking our brains with theories and trying to figure out what it is that you're trying to say from the word go.
Mm.
And the thing that is so exciting about each of these books is that the premise on its face is always something that's like, all right, yeah, I've seen that. And then you
Yeah.
dive in and it's like, oh shit, I haven't seen that. I didn't
Yeah.
expect that. I love it.
I mean, I think that's where contemporary originality lies. Um, because we all consume so many stories and read so much and watch so much now. Um, sure, you can do something that is original at the elevator pitch itself, but largely I find that those kind of things, their execution kind of falls away because you are so sort of hell bent on being original that you've forgotten to tell a good story. Whereas I would much rather go the other way. And I'd much rather go like, I know exactly what this is. How boring. Ram's doing a mecha kaiju thing. Come on, I've seen it so many times. How boring. Ram's doing a noir murder mystery. Come on, I've seen it so many times. And then challenge that every single issue that drops. Go like, oh wait a minute. Oh wait a minute. Oh wait a minute. Oh wait a minute. So I find that that is much more interesting because the novelty of it kind of creeps up on you. It's much like the horror that I love to do. The horror of it creeps up on you. So yeah, The One Hand was certainly something that was very designed to be that. Like when people saw it at first, the number of times Dan and I just sat and looked at reviews and there were people who were like, why is this set in the future? That seems like such a bad decision. Like nothing here says that it's in the future. And Dan and I were like, haha, wait, and read until you get to like issue 3 or 4 and it will make sense. And I think there's that kind of perverse joy in being a creator who does that because you do realize you're being manipulative to some point with your readers. But I think that's part of the joy of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's like taking them along for the right ride because you can at any point, especially with the one hand there, and you could kind of from the world that you've built deviate to wherever you need to go, but you're pointing them in the right direction. You're giving them the clues that are needed or the clues that you
Yeah.
want them to think are necessary to get to an end point where you can flip it on them.
Yeah, and as someone who loves the idea of commenting on stories as well, right? Like you're commenting on the nature of detective stories because everything about the one hand. Like you realize a good mystery is where you have all the pieces for the reader to follow, but the reader is not quite sure exactly how they fit. And it would be a cheat to have like a, I don't know, a Deus Ex reveal at the end going like, and so we've given all the pieces certainly as part of the mystery, but because everyone is used to reading a detective story and not necessarily a sci-fi story done in this way, everyone's only picking on the detective pieces and thinking of the sci-fi as an extraneous element, which by the third issue you realize actually this is a sci-fi story and the detective stuff was the extraneous element. Um, and essentially what you're doing then is you're playing with readers because you're saying this is this kind of roller coaster they get on, and then you realize, oh, it's not one that goes up and down, it's one that goes, side to side or inverts, or your expectation is challenged only because you know what ride you're getting on in the first place.
And that kind of harkens back to what you're talking about, like on the takes with Batman. Like
Yeah.
what you want to do is you're doing your own take on a genre instead of a character in a way.
Yeah, I mean, but also like even down to the granular level, like so many people love that interaction between Gordon and Bruce when they're on two sides of a wall, and Gordon's talking to him, but he assumes Bruce has pulled a Batman and is already not there listening to him. Then you reveal that Bruce is actually standing on the other side of the wall listening to him, but chooses not to say anything. That only works if your readership as a whole is used to the idea of Gordon continuing to talk and Batman has already got it. Doesn't has no emotional impact otherwise. And so it's stuff like that where you're like, I know what your expectations are, therefore I know what not to do and what to do.
Meanwhile, you get to wake up in the morning and get pages sent to you like this from
Yeah, yeah.
Evan Cagle. I'm holding up Dawn Runner issue 4 here. And what is it like for you to get to open your email inbox and see just some of the top creators in this industry sending you pages?
Yeah, I mean, so interesting that you picked up these three books like Rare Flavors, One Hand, Six Fingers, and Dawn Runner. I think they're they're also three very, very different books, right? Like with One Hand, you're playing with the structure more than anything else. With Rare Flavors, you're playing with the emotive elements of it more than anything else. With Dawn Runner, it's been an exercise in, can I or do I know when to get out of the fucking way and just let somebody have 4 pages where you don't have to say shit because
Hell
that
yeah.
person's work is just blowing everything else out of the water. Um, and so working with Evan has been that experience, but also Evan's never done like long form comics before this. His longest thing was like 8 pages at some point, and he wanted to. And Evan and I have this kind of bizarre way in which we got together, in that I had seen his work and I'd gone like, one day when I do that mech story, I'm gonna reach out to this guy and see if he wants to do it. And then quite literally 2 or 3 weeks later, he DM'd me to go like, I just read Graffiti's Wall by you and Anand, and it's such a beautiful book. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. If you ever want to work with like a total newbie, I would love to. And I was like, dude, I was quite literally making a list and saying that I have to get in touch with this guy. Um, and then we started talking about Dawn Runner and his influences. Certainly, you can see already that his influences come from manga and European sci-fi. So it just, everything just clicked into place from there. Um, and I'm pretty proud to say it's an experience that I've had a few times now, to where like Anand, who's won an Eisner for his work on Blue and Green, was someone no one knew about. He was painting portraits and hadn't really come to comics until he did Graffiti's Wall with me. Evan, again, being someone like that. Sumit was already in comics, but people hadn't seen the kind of work he was capable of doing until. And in all of these cases, I'm also very glad to say I've had initial publisher pushback in terms of like, are these guys really ready to make comics? I'm like, doesn't matter. Have you seen Evan's work? Like, he will be ready whenever, you need him to make comics. But um, So this sense of like finding masters of the future has kind of been a very exciting thing for me as someone who's a big fan of comic book art, to be able to go like, I have found this person who maybe 5 years from now is going to be the person everyone's talking about in terms of their work. So I take a lot of joy from that. Uh, so I'm not surprised at all to receive these kinds of pages, because, I've seen these kinds of pages from Evan 5 years ago or 6 years ago, really.
And I feel like Evan's covers for Detective were a part of what kind of initially made people so excited for the book, because it was so different, and it was taking the classic design of the Detective logo and shifting that. And yeah,
So
Evan is,
that logo shift actually came from the editor, Jessica Chen.
oh,
Um, yeah, so she was super excited about the Gothic opera of it all, and she was like, "We're going to shift the logo. We're going to make the book feel like it is that sort of Grand Guignol kind of look and feel to it." Evan just came in and went, "Okay, that's the take. That's the aesthetic. Cool. I think this is what the covers need to look like." Um, Little known story is that when I pitched Detective, I wanted Evan on the interiors, and he was such an unknown at that point in time that DC were like, Who's this guy? Why is he doing interiors?" And so, but glad to say that Evan will be on the future project with me. So whatever is being announced at San Diego, so you will see more Ram and Evan collaborations there.
Let's go. Very
okay.
excited.
That is very exciting.
Yeah, and I think once people see what it is, like, everything will just click into place and make sense. Like the universe will have aligned.
Blink twice if it's Resurrection Man.
No, no, I'm not blinking. You can't see my eyes.
So I wanted to talk about Distillery.
Yeah.
Distillery kicked off last year. I think it was officially founded in May.
Mhm.
And, you guys have put out quite a few books now. How do you feel that, the Distillery experience has been going so far?
I mean, from a personal standpoint, I think it's fantastic just because the people involved are all fantastic people. Um, I've loved most of their work as a reader and as a fan, but I really got to know people like Jock and Lee Garbett and Tula Lote and Becky, and I mean, I already knew some people. I already knew James from before, but I already knew Brian as well before. But just being able to go like, hey, cool, I'm making work alongside all of these people who have admired for a very long time, and they all turn out to be wonderful, lovely people, is a great feeling that you don't really have in comics very often, just because a lot of comics publishing to me feels like people are always trying to see what will stick. And so there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown at the wall, but not necessarily. But your chances of finding something that sticks when you're throwing stuff at the wall that's from these people is so much higher. Uh, it, it I love that there is that sort of inherent expectation of quality. Of course, when Jock and Scott Snyder are doing a book, you're going to expect a certain quality. When Francavilla and Scott are doing a book, you're going to expect a certain quality. Um, and so I love that in some way, like, okay, that expectation is now there on books that I'm doing as well, um, which I think makes me up my game to an extent. I also think Distillery, the production quality, the design, everything is done in a very tasteful way. It feels like a push towards contemporary comics evolving, rather than this idea that we constantly need to keep going back to the 80s to find any kind of success with comics publishing. Like, why doesn't this logo look like it was made in the 80s with hyper saturated colors everywhere, so I quite like that this is a publisher that's saying that, no, we're going to push to doing new things, to doing contemporary design, contemporary production. Those are great things. The book size is great. Artists love having extra room on the page. Writers love being able to say, hey, this has got 9 panels, but you've got all this room on the page. So yeah, in general, it's been a great experience. I'm very excited about the books that are coming up as well. These are all books that I've wanted to do for a very long time, and then Distillery came along. There was this, okay, great. They're going to be housed here. They're going to be homed here. So
I picked up I think every Distillery book that's come out, at least the number one. Um and the presentation is second to none. I
yeah,
feel like that's pretty indisputable.
yeah.
My question is from a I guess a reader standpoint. Have you experienced any, I guess, blowback to some of the changes that you guys have made as far as the presentation, as far as the book size, as far as the price? Because Distillery individual issues are $8.99, $9.99,
Mm-hmm.
$9.99, somewhere
Mm-hmm.
in there. Um, is that something that you've experienced blowback on, and is that a concern for you that there is any level of this that is alienating to the average comics reader?
So short answer is yes, there's blowback. More nuanced answer is, of course, there's blowback. Because I don't think you can, you know what they say about madness, right? You can't keep doing the same things and then suddenly expect to find success. If you're a new publisher in 2024, why would you be doing the same things that a publisher was doing in the 1990s and go, no, this time I'm going to be more successful than anyone else? You have to do other things. You have to try to do different things. And that's going to mean that you think you're selling to group X, and therefore group Y is not happy that you're not selling to them. But these are choices any publisher in any field has to make. They just feel a lot more heightened because comics is such a niche publishing space, right? Compared to novels or books, there are certainly like those Fitzcarraldo editions that are just the blue cover and the wonderfully designed text that has a two pound or $2 additional fee added onto it for no reason other than that it's a Fitzcarraldo edition. Yeah, that's alienating to a lot of people, but you don't hear about that because, of course, it is because it's such a large market. But it becomes a heightened conversation here because comics is not, despite what people like to think, comics is not a very large market. It's still, especially direct market comics, are still a very niche thing. And so any differences there become alienating to a certain group of people and enticing to another group of people. But I think what I respect about the choices Distillery has made is they've said our comics cannot function the same way 80s pulp used to because it's not pulp anymore. It's a collectible. So it's like you going out and buying a vinyl record. They're not at the same price they used to be in the 90s. And so hopefully they're designed better, the production quality is better, and all of that is enticing to you as a customer.
You guys recently announced that you're going exclusive in the direct market with Diamond, and that's gonna take effect with final order cutoff for um for excuse me, for your book, actually. No,
Yeah,
not for
through
your
Red
book.
Windows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For and Life by Brian Azzarello and Stephanie Phillips, which
yeah.
final order cutoff is in 2 days. So again, if you guys want to pre-order that, head on over to your local comic shop, let them know you want it. Do you have any idea of what went into the thought process behind going exclusive with Diamond and becoming a deluxe publisher with them?
To be honest, like on the distribution and production side of things, I'm not really that involved. That would be Chip and David who are running the day-to-day and the publishing side of the company. So beyond a certain point, like I lose interest outside of the creative stuff. The whole reason I'm here is because I want to make stuff I want to make, and I don't want to have to think about other stuff. Um, there are other way more qualified and way more intelligent and way more interested people looking after those things, so that I can continue to focus on the creative side of stuff. So I don't know the decision that's gone behind the exclusivity with Diamond. I can take some wild guesses at it, but probably not wise of me to do. So I trust Chip and David as to why they've made those choices.
So essentially, let Rom cook, let everybody else handle the
Well,
distribution stuff.
well, I'm also kind of very uncomplicated believer in the power of good things. I think if you make good things, whether the circumstances are inclement or encouraging, uh, they will find a way. So, the distillery choices are certainly things that affect the success of these books and how they do well. And I am certainly, to an extent, interested in those things, but that extent is very small compared to my extent in making sure, like, hey, I made a good story with Joel Jones on art, and it was cool, and it did all the things that I wanted it to do. And that's frankly been my career so far. I've not been interested in sales numbers. I've not been interested in distribution channels, because if I wanted to do those things, when I quit chemical engineering, I would have become a publisher. I became a writer because I'm not interested in any of those things. I'm interested in writing. So I know it feels very detrimental. A lot of people I talk about, they're like, oh, you have to know where the industry's going. All of that is great, but it pales in comparison to, I just want a script.
That's really interesting to me, because we've heard from people, I've heard Scott Snyder say this, and certainly other writers as well, who have said, when I decide I'm going to make a book, or I have an idea for a book, I do research to see if this topic is something that is interesting to people right now. And there's almost like a science to deciding what book is up next, and a lot of that is based in data for some writers that I've heard from. Is there any level of that you do when you decide, okay, Dawn Runner's up next, or Rare Flavors is up next, or like, is there any aspect of that goes into your thought process?
Zero from my point of view. My only question I'm asking when I do stuff like that is, am I interested in telling the story? Great. Is someone going to publish it? Wonderful. Those are the only two sort of extraneous to creative process questions that are being asked. I don't do any research. I did a lot of research as an engineer. I'm very bored of doing research. But I'm also very cognizant and respectful of people who approach their storytelling that way. I think from a philosophical standpoint, it belies some level of cynicism, unfortunately, to me, where you feel like you have to do a statistical analysis of your readership to see what they're going to be interested in. Whereas I think the joy really is in writing something and then discovering that your readership was interested in it, or writing something and then discovering no one was interested in it, and maybe 10 years later someone picks it up and goes, hey, actually this was pretty good. And I think that kind of thought process, probably what it comes down to really is, are you willing to do something that is a total failure? And I am 100% willing to do stuff that is a total failure, just because. And when I say total failure, I mean from a industry readership point of view, something that sells nothing, no one read it, no one cared. That's fine, because I still got to make it. Of course, if I only do stuff like that, no one's going to publish me, and so there's enough pragmatism there involved in terms of, like, okay, how do I do something that is generally interesting to a wide group of people? But I don't think that needs any further investigation beyond that. Like, okay, I'm not telling stories about, I don't know, primary school teachers sent on a space trip teaching space cadets in a classroom. That might be a really niche story that no one other than primary teachers or students are interested in. You see what I mean, right? Like the scope of the genre automatically dictates that a certain level of interest will exist in what you're doing, and so you feel confident about telling that story. But if you pick something that is so fundamentally niche, then you run into the risk of no one being interested, which is a risk that you may choose to take. But I think trying to game sales or trying to figure out how best to make something accessible. That kind of stuff always leads to a story or a concept kind of losing its hard edges. And then it becomes this kind of amalgamous thing that is accessible from everywhere, but has nothing particularly poignant or specific to say. And to me, that kind of stuff would be very uninteresting, to go back to the reason why I write the kind of stories that I write.
Do you feel any, or did you feel any risk in Rare Flavors? That being a cooking centric and cooking forward book. Obviously, you tell stories there with mythology and with gods, but was there any, not reservation, any concern in initially publishing that?
No, my first sentence to Philippe was, "No one's going to read this compared to Layla Starr." I hope you are completely aware of that when you get into making this as our second book. And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And to be honest, Philippe and I still feel like this is the more complex and nuanced of the two books. But of course, Layla Starr is more successful because it's about something far more existential. Beyond that, I don't think any of us have any other concerns. I'm sure Boom will have more thoughts on whether they thought one would be more successful than the other or not. But frankly, when we were talking about this book, Boom were so, it was actually not pitched to Boom to begin with. It was brought up in a discussion about a show that I was pitching as a which is why the connection to the Netflix documentary format, if you will. And Boom heard about it in one of those conversations, and they went, "Whether this is actually picked up as a show or not, we don't care, but we would love to publish it as a graphic novel." And so that's how that book came about. So yeah, so everyone was excited in telling it, but I also was very aware from the very beginning that it's not going to do the kind of numbers that Layla Starr did. And you have to, that's what I mean by you have to be okay with that. If you're constantly trying to one up yourself in terms of sales figures, then I think your concern with what you're writing and how you're writing it tends to pale in comparison to that.
Well, I guess to your earlier point, you lose sight of the thing that's like driving you. You lose sight of the end goal there,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
to
yeah,
create.
yeah. Look, and if your end goal is that you want to be this really popular, well-read, everyone's always reading you kind of writer, then 100% you should be worrying about what your readership is going to do, what your sales are. But if your end goal is, I just want to make cool stuff, then you shouldn't ever worry about how many people are going to read it.
And what's the overall interest in the recipes and the cooking? Like where did that come from for you?
I've always been interested in cooking because I think food and cooking is, I've always been interested in languages and cultures, and I think food is the first language, really. Even when you don't understand words that other people are speaking or writing or saying, you can tell so much about a person and their culture just from observing the way they cook and the way they eat their food with their family. Like some cultures are communal eating, so everyone sits at the table, everyone's grabbing from each other's plates, and that says something about the culture. Whereas you visit somebody else in a different country and everyone's got their own plate and their own silverware and their own glass, and that says something. And it's all fascinating to me as a writer and as an observer of humanity to watch. And that felt like something that a lot of people didn't know about Indian food. Like people know Indian food so well because it's so popular, because it's available everywhere. But people have no idea what culture it comes from and what's the cultural marker, why does it exist? And there's so much history to Indian food, and there's so much sort of influence of historical fact on Indian food. Like, where does the North Indian food come from? It's completely different from where South Indian food comes from. And I felt like that was something that was really interesting to share with people. And then the other ulterior motive was, can I make recipes a readable part of narrative fiction and comics rather than feeling like they were extraneous things tacked on? So those two things essentially led to Rare Flavors.
The recipes part of it was really like, I was like, I've never seen this before. This is fascinating
Yeah,
to me, especially in
yeah.
a,
Like I don't know if you've ever watched this film called Master Gardener. Paul Schrader, who did the screenplay for Taxi Driver, um, wrote and directed Master Gardener, and he does this wonderful thing where the story is essentially about this kind of, I think, ex sort of white supremacist enforcer who's trying to change his life around, and works for this oddly stilted plantation lady. It's complex. It's got, you know, bullets, action, drama, etc. But his newfound life involves him being a gardener, um, who essentially cultivates these rare botanical plants. And so the story is interspersed with just textual readings of how to grow plants. It has no connection narratively, no direct connection narratively with what's happening in the story. And yet, because it overlays thematically, it makes just instructions on, like, the XYZ plant does not grow during winter. So you must, plant it in this soil during this time of year. Just that overlaid with his personal life has so much thematic resonance that it makes the instructions feel like they're part of the story. And I actually saw that after Rare Flavors. And so had this immense moment of pride going like, oh, cool. The screenplay writer who wrote Taxi Driver is doing the same thing I did with the Rare Flavors. So.
and I think with food specifically, like it's so, like the senses that food deals with, you cannot handle in comics. Scent and
Sure.
taste, but the writing of it has to then click, triggers in memory to make you kind of
Yeah.
sense those things. And I think that
Yeah. And all food, in fact, I think if you talk to chefs, like food
yeah,
works like that.
hmm
The reason certain food feels better cooked than certain other food is also more involved with trying to invoke memory rather than trying to make a dish. The best chefs are trying to get the details of what it felt like when your grandmother was making some food for you, rather than trying to find out at what temperature this cooks the best, if you see what I mean. So there are people who will put compostable vegetables in their soil so that when another vegetable grows in that soil, it carries some measure of the taste of the vegetable that was put to add nutrients to that soil in the first place. Stuff like that comes from this idea of, like, I need to invoke this memory, therefore I need the aftertaste of this to exist.
So for the last few minutes here, guys, we've got 50 plus of you watching live. I hope you've been enjoying our conversation with Ram so far. What I want you to do, because we talked about the giveaway, we're going to give away one of Ram's books, a collected, like Blue and Green, something that's already finished, or a volume of Detective Comics or anything like that. Whatever you want, we're going to give away to somebody that is watching live right now. So what I want you to do is I want you to type in chat, lurkers, regulars, everybody, let Ram cook. Everybody who types let Ram cook in the chat is going to be entered into the giveaway. And then also, I want to make sure you guys know that when we wrap up with Ram and we close out the show, we are going to go live again for our channel members to talk about everything that we discussed here with Ram, and kind of do a talk back with you all. So if you want to do that, and we can talk about some Absolute DC stuff, Ram, I know you can't say anything about that, but we'll talk a little bit about Absolute DC with you guys too. So if you want that, hang around, channel members. We will go live with you for the first time ever to have some conversations about those things. So let Ram cook in the chat if you want to enter the giveaway.
It's like post-match analysis for the podcast. It's great.
Yes, exactly.
Wild.
and while we let the chat cook, I just want to bring up a comment that Steve Matthews made here. He said, I love Rare Flavors. I mean, I'm an archaeologist studying ancient foodways in Africa and gave copies of Rare Flavors to my colleagues to read.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love it.
Wow, that's super cool. We
I
have
mean, these are the things that I love. Like people have, what sales did it do? Was it successful? No. The stuff I love is when people go like, I shared this with I'm a student chef. I shared this with my classroom, and they all loved it. Great. I get random pictures of people going like, I made this obscure South Indian dish, and I'm a dude in Michigan. I've never made this before. I love that. That like that's the kind of stuff that I find super, super rewarding about doing work.
But that's so quintessential to storytelling is the sharing of ideas. And you're now sharing culture. You're reaching out across to the world, quite frankly,
Yeah.
and saying,
Yeah.
here's a part of me. And people are saying, oh wow, I can make that a part of me. Whether
Yeah.
it's the
And
story, whether it's the dish, that's beautiful.
and it works across cultural divides. So it's like a bridge from it's an impossible bridge, literally, from one place to the other that only exists in translation. It's not even the same bridge I made technically. Like I wrote Rare Flavors, but I don't control how it's read by somebody else. So somebody else reading has to construct a near semblance of the same bridge that I put out and hope that it joins somewhere in the middle to be able to truly get what's happening. And that's such a wonderful thing about stories in general.
Fuck, I love stories. Oh my God, that's just so cool. We've got a few listener comments that we want to get to. Cale, can you jump in and grab one of those?
You got it. So the first one here is from Harris. Will radio apocalypse return?
Very, very unlikely for multiple reasons. Vast majority of them involving things beyond our control, like payment and whatnot. So it is what it is. But Anand and I will be collaborating on many, many more things.
Right. This one is from Mike Elliott. Where did the impetus for Dawn Runner come from, and how has the interior process been with Evan Cale? I believe these are some of his first interiors, and they are jaw-dropping.
Yeah, the idea for Dawn Runner actually came up in 2017, something like that, on a walk back from a convention in London, where I was telling a friend of mine about this mecha story that I wanted to do, which also had elements of the film Frequency, where the father and son are communicating across time over radio. I just love that as an element to bring into, because the mecha kaiju stories are really about understanding your own mecha as a reflection of some elements of yourself in some way. And so just taking those two elements and going, what if this made sense? But I didn't have the time or the mind space to actually work on that book until much later. And then when it came, I saw this Evangelion piece that Evan had done called Golgotha. And I went, this is the guy I need to work with. In terms of the interiors process, actually, Evan's already had the skill set to do this largely because he worked in animation and games, also storytelling medium. So he understands how to use art to do storytelling. I think the only places where I think it's been a little learning process in some ways is how to work with still images rather than moving images. Even as an animator, even though you're drawing still images, you're always thinking of them as this will be in motion, this will move. And so sort of restraining yourself to go like, no, it has to make sense as a still image. I think once, and it's not something I control, once that clicks in Evan's head, you're going to see him take a leap further in terms of the storytelling as well.
Get the most heightened moment of a thing. Like you have to aim that right.
I mean, yes, the most heightened moment ideally, but also sometimes it's easier to express something in motion, like something as simple as a person getting slapped. Much easier to express in motion. Whereas if I were to say, give me a still image of someone getting slapped, it's such a hard thing to do because you're trying to convey inherently a very kinetic moment through a very non-kinetic instance. And so you always risk the fact that it looks very stilted, or you try to slow down time. That's why you see so many sort of slow motion punches in comics, is that everyone's trying to just slow down time to almost a still moment so you can accept it. There's an artist called Mukesh Singh who did comics in India, who I love and respect. He had this very interesting take that in comics you only show either the moment before or the moment after. You never show the actual moment. So, you know, when you're getting punched or slapped, it's always like the slap has already happened, and then you're seeing the aftermath of it, which is not something you necessarily think of as a reader, but something you constantly have to think of as someone who's drawing that panel. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Closure.
Fascinating. Make sure you guys, by the way, if you're watching us, are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you like the video. Keep typing "Let Rom Cook" if you want to be entered into the giveaway. We've got a few
Man, I
more
wish I was
listeners.
watching this live chat somewhere just to see this kind of wall of Let Rom Cook going up.
It's definitely there. The
Pretty cool.
people very much are very excited, and we've had quite a few comments come in because people love your work, and
Thank you.
I love when we get to have creators on, especially of your stature, because you like you said, you're in your own cave. You don't necessarily get to experience the love, and so having it be here right now live, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I just love when people get excited about stories and when people get excited about storytelling in general. I think stories are by far one of the most beautiful things humanity has created in its time. And yeah, I just love sharing my excitement. Part of the reason I always say yes to you guys is just feels like talking to people who are genuinely excited about stories and storytelling.
And thank you for that. Thank you for always being so gracious to come on with us. Marco, you want to tackle another one?
Yeah. This one is from Christian Uncaged. My question is, do you take your potential audience into account while scripting, or is it a more personal process for you? You've answered that. So I guess if you could focus a bit more on the personal end, like what about that comes about from you that you plug in?
I mean, you always take your audience into account when you're scripting because inherently, certainly commercial art is a communicative process, right? Like yes, on a personal level, I'm wanting to express something, but I'm also very aware that I'm making commercial art that is expected to be sold and people are going to read it. So I better be expressing myself in a way that is, at least to some measure, communicating with someone who's reading it. Um, so you take into consideration things like clarity, things like have I given the reader enough time to understand what I'm trying to say? Have I provided enough motivation for the reader to be interested in what I'm saying rather than just me to be interested in what I'm saying? So those kinds of things you do consider, but beyond that, what happens in the story, why it's happening, what you're doing with the characters, and how they speak, who they are, all of those things are essentially, they come from you and they have to be necessarily steeped in your own interests. I don't know, does that make sense? I feel like it's such a difficult line to draw between what's for yourself and what's for the reader. The only time that distinction ever comes up for me is I write something and I can't tell if it's good or bad because I've spent so much time writing it. And the only way for me to know if it makes any kind of sense is to send it to somebody else and then say, how do you feel about this? And when that happens, that's the only time my brain goes, oh, you actually needed somebody else to look at this to know if it was working or if it wasn't. So yeah, so there's certainly that element of it.
One of the things I love about reading Big Two comics is that you, the creative team, already have an idea that I like Batman because I'm buying it because I like Batman. So that part of it is already out the way. But then you say, okay, well, hey, you've been reading Batman for 20 years. I bet you've never seen this. And then you do the scene where Gordon and Batman are talking and Batman leaves and you
Sure.
think like that only works, like you said,
Yeah.
because of my
Yeah.
connection to that character. So in that moment, it's like you're speaking directly to me. And obviously you're
Yeah.
targeting every Batman fan, but I am one of them. And that
Yes.
feels personal.
Yes, and it's personal also because I only use that because I found the whole Gordon Batman disappearing shtick to be fun and interesting and endearing in the same way that you did. So that's what I mean by the look, there's that bridge again.
Right.
Also, another interesting sort of aspect of that is the number of times, you'll pitch a story or you'll tell a story, and if the pitch is rejected or if you're not getting to tell it on the big two stuff, a lot of creators will come and say, why don't you just do it as a creator own, like, file off the serial numbers and just do it as a book you would tell. And I can see that working for some stories, but certainly in my case, and I know a couple of other creators, like, I would only pitch a story that works as a big two book. I wouldn't ever pitch a thing that was easy enough to translate to some other genre. Like, this Batman story would not work if I created a whatever Batman lookalike and just did it as a creator-owned book. It doesn't work. And in the same way, like this obscure character book, like I pitched that story to DC in 2019, and at the time, I was told, yeah, listen, every writer wants to come in and do their weird, obscure character reinvention. And the problem is, you're not all Grant Morrison, you're not all Alan Moore. So, like, most of the time, you're going to come in and do this thing and no one's going to care. So, I want to temper your expectations in terms of taking obscure characters. And I feel like over the years, maybe I have enough of a readership cachet now for DC to go like, okay, maybe if Ram does this obscure character book, some people will read it. But in that time from 2019 to 2024, not at one point did I go, yeah, I should just do this as a creator-owned book. It just doesn't work. So certainly in terms of that, you're telling stories that are very specifically tailored to the medium, the genre, the place, the backdrop that they are situated in.
Absolutely.
Surely that would take away from the heart of the story if you could just file the serial numbers off too. Like,
yeah, it would. And also, like, the other thing, certainly in my case, is my creator-owned books are so far away from the superhero stuff. Like, it's not like I've done a superhero adjacent creator-owned thing. Like, all of my creator-owned stuff has been really far away from it. So that gap is not even crossable in my head. So the number of times when people go like, why don't you just do it as a creator-owned book? My brain just goes, no, because I would do something completely different as a creator-owned book.
Mm-hmm. It would almost feel like a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Tyler, do you want to grab the next one?
Yeah. So, that was the one from Link, right? Is that correct?
That was
Yeah. So, is there a future for the Vigil at DC, or did you tell the story you wanted to tell with those characters? If another writer wanted to tackle that team, would it be difficult for you to let go of those characters?
Yes, there is a future for the Vigil at DC, but we don't know what that future is yet, because I don't think DC knows what that future is yet. And yes, there are, and the way they're designed, there are an infinite number of stories I could tell with the same team, pushing them in interesting different ways. And then for the third question, no, I would never feel like it was hard for me to let go, because, again, like I said, I'm genuinely someone who believes in the joys of storytelling. And I think the beauty of mythological storytelling is certainly, on one end, for me to take somebody else's dear work and then totally turn it on its head. And so if I'm okay with that, I necessarily should be okay with somebody taking characters that I've created and doing whatever they want with them. I think it's fascinating to see that, and it's fascinating to take that into consideration. Something that comes up quite a lot in my editorial conversations as well is people going like, I know there's all of this continuity behind it, which, like, feel free to choose what you want to take from it and ignore the stuff that doesn't work for you. And I go like, no. The way I approach continuity is everything happened all at once. And so the joy is in taking two completely opposite things and going like, nope, both of these happened, and we're going to reconcile them in this interesting way. I think that's part of the joy of superhero comics, certainly, and certainly part of the joy of telling something that's considered contemporary mythology. So I would love for another writer to come in and take, maybe do a buddy Swamp Thing, Levi and Alex Holland traveling the swamp side together story.
The swamp side. That's the title right there.
The swamp side.
I read that. And we've got one more comment that we wanted to get to.
I can grab that.
Sure.
From Manny, what is your favorite form of art to write about? You've touched on music, food, illustrating, writing, opera in your work so far. What's next?
I guess music would probably be my favorite of the lot. Um, just because it's an art form that I keep coming back to outside of writing. Very aware of not doing a story that's about writing because it's such a wanky thing to do. Like, I'm a writer, I write stories about writing. Yeah, so very aware of not doing that, but everything else is fair game. So yeah, I think music is something that I would certainly want to return to. Um, yeah, I don't necessarily know that I think about it enough to have an opinion beyond that. I get obsessed and fascinated with other creative things, not necessarily just art forms. And so my stories tend to go like, okay, what if I took this creative thing and then found a new way to express it in a new medium, which is kind of how Rare Flavors came up. Is this? It wasn't even the actual food at that point in time. It was just like, can I take recipes as a creative medium and try to create stories with them? So yeah.
I'm waiting for the chemical engineering comic.
Yeah, I didn't love chemical engineering that much.
So we're gonna announce the winner of the giveaway in just a moment. Ram, I would love it if you could share your thoughts because you did this last year and it resulted in a moment that we reference a lot on the show. So I would love it if you could share just some thoughts that you might have, as deep or as shallow as you want, about where we are at this moment in time with AI.
Oh, with AI?
Yeah, particularly how it's infiltrated comics and, just your thoughts.
I have thoughts on it that don't necessarily look. I think it becomes a point of contention without necessarily being a threat in the way that people think it's a threat. Um, on one end, and this is me criticizing the existence of AI. On one end, I think is being perpetuated by a group of people who have never had to find the vulnerability within themselves to try and actually create a work of art. Um, and so the idea is they feel, like I said, you're either in love with writing or you're in love with the idea of being a writer. And these are people who are way too much in love with the idea of being a writer or an artist without ever actually having to find a moment of where like I really need to express this in themselves. Because if they had found that moment, they would know that the joy is in sort of putting in the work to express rather than the final result of what you've made. And the AI just takes away the work of expressing yourself and it gives you a final result that isn't even really you. So I don't understand it at all as a way of creating art. But it's being portrayed as this thing that is this kind of great leveler that makes creation a more democratic and accessible thing by a lot of people who propagate this. And the truth of it is that it is going to do the opposite because we live in a capitalist economy run world. And what's going to happen is AI is become, this whole conversation will fall off because we'll find something else to be interested by. A new shiny will come up. But AI is going to become very innocuously a part of everything that we consume and take in. It won't be your next comic is not going to be written and drawn by AI, but the person who's designing the milk carton that your milk gets delivered in the morning, that person's job is going to go away, and that's going to be AI generated. The person who draws the signboard for every shop that you walk past is going to be AI generated. And what that's going to do is it's going to decimate the middle class of every creative profession, which is not people who are designing the next Urge museum in Belgium, but they're designing your, Christmas banners. They're designing the menus in the restaurant that you go into. Those guys are going to go away. Those jobs are going to go away. And they're all going to be replaced by this AI that no one hears about, no one questions. Like, how many times do you ask, like, was my menu made by a real person? And so when that happens, what you've essentially done is the opposite of democratizing something. The only people who are going to be making the kind of art that we talk about now, the designing of museums, the writing of comics, the writing of books, the creating of illustrations, the only people who are going to be doing that are people who have access to a living in those fields without necessarily having had to go through this process of like, no, I worked, I designed menus, then I got a job doing something else, then I got a job doing something else. And eventually I was this guy who designed this thing that you all know about. And so the only way you have access to that now is, my daddy made a lot of money and I didn't have to do anything else. And I was just designing things when I was in college and I happened to have talent to make something that was good. So that's going to happen. And so this is the opposite of democratizing art. On the other side, I think there's going to be a lot of outrage generated by the existence of AI that we can't tell the difference between someone who's done something from scratch and someone who's generated something on AI. And there's going to be a lot of innocent people caught in the crossfire there who didn't necessarily use AI, but just their work looks very eerily similar to something that was scraped by AI. And because we don't have the ability to distinguish one from the other, and we have created social media as a system of casting suspicion everywhere, these people are going to get hounded out of professions that they're actually good at. So yeah, that's my wonderful, hopeful take on AI. Largely, I don't think any of this is actually AI because I don't think there's any intelligence in taking patterns and scraping them to find something that is mediocrely acceptable to everyone. So I wouldn't call this AI. I would call this like bad pattern recognition, really. And yeah, it's going to become as ubiquitous as your self-checkout counter at every sort of mall that you've been to, where it's incredibly frustrating because you've run through something that's not in the system yet. And now it's like you have to wait for a human assistant to come up. And you know that if you were just at a counter, they would have rung it through and you would have been fine. And that's how it's going to be.
Let Rom cook. And we've already seen it in comics. We've seen the problem of, something that could that gets people's, gears turning about, oh, is that AI?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it just happened to Car Andrews where it's like, wait a second, are you guys sure you want to target this person? Do you know it for a fact, or is it just your supposition now becoming a reality that this person has to live with? That's dangerous for our industry. I really believe that.
And the people to blame are people who should have had legislation in there from the very beginning, who should have made laws and seen this coming, and they won't. Instead, the UK, for example, is saying, hey, we're going to get growth from investing in AI. What you're really investing in is going to get rid of a lot of jobs. It's going to bring growth, but then it's going to bring growth to an economy that doesn't really have a way for people who need that growth. It doesn't really have a way for it to trickle down to because you've decimated the lower end of jobs. Whereas what it should be doing is helping you create bigger picture jobs. Use AI to figure out how a city consumes energy. That's great. Don't use AI to design your next railway signs.
Pete Collins in our chat, who is the artist behind the Bardic Verses, he says art is the work that goes into it, and I agree with
Yeah.
that wholeheartedly.
100%. It's about process. It's not about product. But we live in a society that holds product over process all the time, all the time.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, Rom. Let's get to the giveaway. Let's get something good in the hands of one of our listeners.
Cool. All right, let me pick a random name here. Catherine.
Hey,
Oh, no
okay,
way.
Catherine, winning anything that Rom has done. You let us know what you want. If you would like, Catherine, for us to like give you recommendations or pick for you or whatever, let us know. But you win. Congratulations, Catherine. That's awesome.
Rom's unfinished copy of Lord of the Rings manuscript from when he was 13. No.
Bro, she
Hold
is the
on.
one person who would like light that on fire in like the good way, not like light it on fire, but like she would tear it up.
That's awesome. I love when we get to give away some stuff to the audience.
Congratulations, Cat.
Yes, indeed, and we expect a book report. Make sure that you guys go to your local comic shop and let them know that you want the Distillery books that are on the horizon through Red Windows by Rom and Joelle Jones. Make sure you let them know that you want that. That is the best way to ensure that you get these books in your hands, is to let the LCS know. Final order cutoff is coming up this Monday, so you've got a couple days to get that done. But if you want it, that's what it takes. And then Dawn Runner 5 is also dropping this September. So Dawn Runner's been fantastic if you want to get in on the ground floor, which is one of the beauties of Rom's books, at least as it turns right now. They're really bite-sized. So you can say, hey, this is only 5 issues deep. I'll go get the first 4. And you can, be right where I'm at with it. So Rom is one of the greatest minds we have in the industry. Protect him, let him cook, and enjoy the work. Rom, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure, as always.
Oh, is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to let the listeners know about?
No, just to keep on the, stay tuned and keep a lookout for future announcements, because there's a bunch of them about to come up between now and end of the year. And then other I can only talk about it. It's always weird. Like, end up doing these podcasts where I always have announcements coming up, so I can't really plug anything that isn't announced. And everything I've finished working on is kind of finished. There's no sense in me plugging it. So there you go.
Well, at the right Rom, right, on X, to keep up
That's
with
right.
all your work.
Yes.
We will be right back, listeners. We're going to say bye to Rom, and we will join you in just a few moments. So, Rom V.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Amazing.
awesome. Blaze Man, dude, you missed out, buddy. You missed out. Promiscuous Time Traveler, you missed out. You guys got to go and run it. You got to run it.
Forget what you're listening to now. Back this shit up and go listen to that.
At the
This
start.
is going to be nonsense.
Yeah, what did you guys think? Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the questions that you guys sent in. There's so many of you, and it's so difficult, at least for me, to keep up with the comment section when we are having an interview, when we're doing an interview. So, sorry if there were any questions that you guys wanted us to get to. That's why submitting them before the show through Discord is just the most effective way. Like, we got to pretty much everybody's Discord questions. So if you want your questions to be asked to our guests, that really is the best way. And if you're a patron or a channel member or whatever, like, you go up the queue. But we're wordy. We show up here and talk for 3 hours every weekend. So clearly we have a lot of shit to say. And then if we're having on a writer, they write every day. They have shit to say. So it's like really difficult to wedge everybody's thoughts in. But we do the best we can for you guys. And hopefully you enjoyed that interview.
Thank you, Amin Perez, for gifting a YouTube membership to Moonarch.
Oh, hello.
Lurk.
You know what that means? You know what happens when you gift a membership?
Angel
Oh,
gets
we
its
having a
wings.
gift spree. Let's go.
Well, since Amin decided
Wait, hold on, Sean.
to do it to us and decided to give away a membership, we are going to do the same. As we said, after this show ends, we are going to go live again with our channel members for the first time ever. A channel membership live. We're going to talk about ROM. We're going to talk about Absolute DC or whatever the hell you guys want. And so we are giving away 5 memberships right now to people who will hopefully come and join us for the live chat. So here we go. Giving away 5 right now. Congratulations to
Steve Matthews, Sean Ali, Shadow Walker, Fresh News 24/7, and Syl Stevenson.
Hey.
Awesome.
Wow.
I see a couple regulars in there. I see some lurkers in there. I love that. Love that for you all. Enjoy your early access videos and enjoy your pals heads. I want to see some pals heads in the chat. Let's get it.
Steve Matthews
get
already
it.
on it.
Yes.
Wow,
Amin says Sean going band for band. You know what it means.
I'm just gonna grab this comment from Tektronic real quick. That was a wonderful discussion. I'm a filmmaker who just finished my 5th short film. Congratulations. I'm embarking on my first film festival run. So much of Rom's perspectives were incredibly insightful for me.
Oh, that's cool.
And good
That's
luck
why
on
we do it, man.
Yeah, good luck on the film festival run. That's a big deal.
That's massive.
And it's
5.
It's hard.
5 short films
Yeah.
is a lot of short films.
Dude, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see one of your projects, and keep doing it. We have some real creative people in our community, which I love so much. And we get to see some of that stuff in the Discord when you guys post, and knowing that we get to have on creators of ROM stature who are really out there doing it and making it happen. Somebody I think about in that ilk is Brian Hill, who also is making movies and television and stuff like that. These people are just people like you. And the only reason why they're in the position that they're in is because, yes, they have the talent, but they also have the drive to make it happen. So the fact that you've done 5 short films already, that's amazing. That's amazing. And one day, if you keep it up and you've got the goods, you'll be on that level.
Get the call, man.
Yeah. Look at all those pals heads. I love to see it.
Wow.
Love to see it. You guys are great. Next week is going to be a big one because so much has happened in the last week. I always, like, whenever we have an interview, right? I always know in the back of my mind, like, some shit's going to happen this week.
Yep.
And we are just not going to be able to get into it. I always know that.
On the plus side is something goes wrong, we have a good backup.
Sure.
Yeah.
But next week, we're going to get into all the stuff that's dropped. Like, we're going to talk about the Captain America Brave New World trailer that dropped. And we can kind of share our thoughts about that in the after party with channel members here in a little bit. I have a lot of thoughts about that trailer. We're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into the precursor to San Diego Comic-Con, because this is it. Next week is the last week before SDCC, and we all know, whether Rom can talk about it or not, whether Scott can talk about it or not, we all know what is coming, and we're gonna run down like what SDCC weekend is gonna look like. Big news.
You see, Scott retweeted the Absolute Batman image saying, "What is that?"
Yeah, what is that? Yeah, I wonder, Scott.
Dude.
Huh?
Yeah. I
Who's
love
that
it.
pointy-eared freak?
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got a lot of stuff going on. And also, if you want to hear some of our thoughts about Absolute DC already that we've had, we did a little bit of a conversation over on Pals Pulls from this past weekend, and that is a standalone video as well. So if you're curious about our Absolute DC thoughts, those are available for you. We talked about some of the leaks that Bleeding Cool's been putting out. Just amazing reporting on the part of Rich Johnson. My man has a mole in DC, right? Like, come on.
Or
Informants.
publishing. What I love about Rich's coverage of it is that it is slowly drip fed. Like, he has so much, probably. And he's like, I'm going to show you this page. I'm going to show you this page.
Right?
Smart stuff. Blaze Man, thank you for becoming a VI pal.
Thanks,
Hey.
Blaze, man. Really appreciate you.
Wow.
Hope to see you in our channel member live stream here in a few minutes. And thank you for becoming a VI pal. Hope you enjoy your emojis and your early access to videos. Appreciate you. So yeah, we've got a lot on the docket coming up here in the next couple weeks. I'm very excited. I love con season, guys. It's so much fun.
And we didn't even talk about Boom either. Like, this stuff is going
Yeah.
crazy this past week.
It's too much,
yeah.
man. The industry's
yeah.
moving.
Mm-hmm. The industry is moving, and keeping up with all of it is a job unto itself, but luckily for us, this is what we love to do, so we get to come and talk about it every week. Boss Rendier says, excellent interview, just caught up at times 2 speed.
Amazing.
Thank you, dude. Appreciate you.
Amin said episode 404. If this was Batman, it would be your year 1, part 1.
Oh,
That's cool.
I used to do a segment on here where I would take the number episode and then find a comic that reflected it. That's a cool one. I wish we had gotten that far. Yeah.
Comic not found.
You don't remember that?
Oh, I get it.
No, that was a 404 joke.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it.
An error 404.
All right.
Sorry, IT guy.
Harris says, that absolute Batman, I thought it was Zangief from Street Fighter cosplaying as Bats.
I forget who commented on the video on YouTube, but he said it was like Batman with thunder thighs, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a thing.
Facts. You know that chafing is bad.
Oof.
You know them thighs are busted up.
Ooh.
Catherine with the giveaway of a channel membership. Congratulations to Kefis.
Let's go.
You're gonna,
Yes.
you're gonna be
Arch
saying that again
rival.
soon.
Arch rival. Nemesis. That's canon, Kefis. Put that in.
No, I love Kefis. And Kefis, by the way, actually has led the charge. So, for those of you who don't know, we've got a Discord server. And on that Discord server, we have a private chat for our patrons. And Kefis has really led the charge in getting together the Pals verse and putting a wiki together for us.
Wild.
A fandom wiki,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That is incredible. We started the Palsverse 2 years ago. I had the idea to like, do something a little extra for you guys. And in my wildest dreams, I don't think in our wildest dreams did we think that, you guys would take it that far. And I absolutely love it. The fact that there's a wiki page is fucking crazy. And this is just the tip of the iceberg for what's coming. Like it's gonna evolve and grow and get bigger, and it's incredible.
Amin just gave another one
Oh my goodness.
to Momentum Mike Elliott.
Let's go.
Hell yeah. Love it. Love it. Everything we're doing on here is for you guys. And the fact that we have built something now to where we can have it. I mean, we've been having incredible guests on the show for years, but to where we can have them on the show and have all of you a part of it and do cool things like the Pals verse and just grow this beast. I can't wait to see where we are at in a year from now. But I promise you this. This I promise. One day, all this effort, the Pals verse, everything else, it's going to pay off into something that's probably cooler than any of the four of us could have ever thought we would get to do. I'm very confident in that.
Looking forward to that. That's end goal stuff.
Huh.
End goal, we can't even fathom. That's like step 2. That's act 2 of the Comics Pals.
End goal is a coffin. Like, I'd rather not think about that. I want to think about all the fun stuff that leads up to it.
I want to be on here telling you guys that we're going to be doing a presentation at San Diego Comic-Con or New York Comic-Con.
Be on here talking about doing a TV show on Saturday mornings instead of being stuck on YouTube. Like,
oh shit. Well, you can make a bet with Kefis on that. bet Kefis on whether or not we're going to make it on Saturday morning television.
Does that even exist anymore?
Shit,
Right.
didn't they just cancel Cartoon Network?
No,
What?
it's a production studio and still a channel. It's a thing.
Yeah,
Oh.
Cale, why would you move us backwards into TV, dude? Like,
Yeah.
who has cable?
Okay, Grandpa.
wow.
I didn't expect that attack.
I thought that was a cool thing to say.
I want to be on TV. Shit, what the fuck?
I'm just YouTube's the new TV.
Yeah. Uncanny Suit says release the Comics Pals cut.
Ooh.
Damn. Robert Cashaback says we will form our own island nation.
Hell yeah. Krakoa.
Mm.
You know what?
Krakosi.
Make more pals.
Yes. Yes. And the way we can make more pals is by subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing what we do. If you have a love of what we do and you want to make more pals, the best way to do that is to spread the gospel. You know, I'm not going to be Jim Jones on the island that we create. I'm not going to ask you to drink Kool-Aid. But I do hope that if this is something that you love, then you have people in your life that you think might love it too. Or when someone says on social, hey, what's your favorite comics podcast, that maybe you mention us. You know, when you mention Comic Pop, as you should, or you mention Comics Are Dope, as you should, hopefully we're on your mind as well when those conversations come up.
Tektronic says Comics Koa, first law, make more pals.
Hell yes.
That's what it is.
Love it. Not the Krakusi, says Basrandir.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, if you have your own island nation, it's
Yeah.
only appropriate that you commit, war crimes.
Dude. No.
Well, all right.
Pals Koa. I love that. Yeah, hell yeah. Dan says, I'm working on something for the truth in my brain, trying to free up some time to actually write it. Yeah, I was thinking that we should have like a fanfic section of
Ooh.
our Discord server.
Already working on it. Don't.
Catherine's eyes
Oh,
just lit up somewhere.
Is that what you've been working on?
Yeah.
Is it
those
slash fic?
Those random thread things that I have.
Uh-oh.
boy.
I've been testing stuff. So
Yeah, I saw you working on the Discord. I don't know. What are you doing over there?
yeah.
Oh boy.
Owen Harrison said, someday Feige or Gunn will come on here. Dude, I have said, listen, you can't see it, but right off to the side, I have an altar to Kevin Feige. I have one for Grant, one for Rick, and one for Kevin. Rick Remender. And one day, Kevin Feige will be here. I have prayed on it. I have prayed at the altar. And he will join this podcast one day. He already did the Marvel podcast. We're the next step.
We're probably better, to be honest.
listen, they got Kevin Feige, so they're kind of better just off that.
Well,
But
I mean, listen, but
production
we don't
too,
have
yeah.
Disney money.
that's true. But they probably didn't have to pay Disney money to get Kevin on, which is what it would take for us. Unfortunately.
James Gunn though, great. I would kill for that. Because
I would love to have James Gunn on the show.
yeah.
But then it's like it would just be like having him on Twitter on here. The
Yeah.
comments section would all be, are you doing this? Is this character going to
Yeah.
be in phase 1 of your DC stuff? And he's just going to say no to everything.
Mm.
You see those retweet numbers? I'm cool with that.
That is more than fair. That is more than fair. Amin says, I'm trying to get some people to join my cult, and then I'll think about some stories from my Palsverse character. Yes, the cult of Amin, the Almighty. You got that right. Robert says, hidden among the rows of Sean Stack lurks a creature of unknown, or an unknown creature. Listen, you don't know how close to being right you are about that.
You have like a Dianoga in your stack of comics over there.
Tyler, yet again, you have said something that I don't know what the
it's
fuck it means.
the Star Wars trash monster.
Oh.
Oh, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
forgot
even know
that
it had
that's
a
not
name.
common knowledge. Yeah.
Hound said, pals have integrity, more powerful than any stack of cash. And I'm going to step off that. I can't.
Yeah, I might too.
Listen, I have student loans. Like,
Well, you guys may or may not know this, but like when I say the show's sponsored and supported by you all, that is literally true. Like
1000%.
it's and by the show we mean the Comics Pals LLC
Enterprise.
business,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not like I'm walking around with money that came from you guys. You know, none of us are. We don't profit off of this to our pockets. We put it into the business so we can do things to make this product better. But yeah, we don't see dime or cent. This is passion. This is love.
Up your donations.
That too. Rami says Jason Fabok. He's pretty accessible for us. We can probably make that happen. There's just been a weird thing with Ghost Machine in terms of being able to get certain people on, but we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to Jason.
And from
Very
the
much
times we
so.
did talk to him at New York Comic Con, he's a talkative guy. So he might be like, sometimes artists are a little tricky to get on podcasts because I feel like writers want to talk about things more.
Artists are too busy drawing their lives away.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
I mean, you absolutely were not retconned out. In fact, I referenced you. You may not. I don't know if you were listening or know this, but your power set and what it is that you do in the Palsverse has been the impetus for a lot of the chaos that we see. So your legacy is alive and well, and your message is pretty clear, and it's wide sweeping, which is why we need heroes like Dan and Atomic Hound. You can't eat passion. Let's get the pals some real money. I hear that, Dan. I hear that.
I like that phrase, actually.
Yeah. I can't eat passion and my stomach is rumbling. So okay. Look, the next time we're going to be live with you is this Thursday. Well, no. The next time we're going to be live with you is
Right
in
now.
about 5 minutes. Maybe not even 5 minutes, because as soon as we wrap this, we are going to go live again, channel member exclusive. So if you want to hang out with us, it's not to alienate you. We love you all, but we want to, do something special for the channel members because you guys are so great and gracious to support us. So we're going to go live again, talk a little bit more about the interview with Rom, talk about Absolute DC, talk about whatever you guys want. It'll be 20 to 30 minutes, so you don't have to budget too much more of your time for us if you want to hang out. And that'll be a lot of fun. After that, it'll be this Thursday for Pals Pulls. I'll give you guys a tease of what we're going to be talking about on Thursday because we've got Superman 16 on deck, Phoenix #1, which I'm super excited about, as you can imagine, Ultimate X-Men #5, and calling my shot, the pick of the week, Powerpuff Girls #1.
Oh, that's gonna be fire.
Hell yeah.
Kelly Thompson, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Paulina Gaina show.
It's going to be sick. So That's going to be a lot of fun. Come with us. Come hang out with us on Thursday at 6 p.m. for Pals Pulls. Join our Discord server. If you love the community and you feel like you consider yourself a part of it or want to grow in it and become more a part of it, Discord is the best place to do that. There's a link to it in the description of everything that we do. And if you want to sponsor and support the show, the best way to do that is patreon.com/thecomicspals. We appreciate everybody who does that. We try to give you guys bang for your buck. Andrew Smith, your Pals verse Origin is coming next week. We appreciate all of you who have joined us. It's been a lot of you over the last few weeks. This thing's growing, and it's not lost on us how special it is that you choose us to be your home in comics. Thank you. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Channel members, get ready. We're going to be live here in a few minutes. So check YouTube for when we go live. Hit the notification bell so you know it. We'll send a link in the Discord as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.
See you next week.
Rihanna, sorry, I missed the cue.
Oh yeah, I gave the.
Yeah, I tabbed away. So this is our talk back piece after episode 404. We just had an incredible conversation with Rob V. If you're watching us in the future and you haven't heard that, definitely listen to our conversation with Rom. I think it was incredible, probably our best one with him yet, and we've done 3. He's just such an incredibly insightful, thoughtful creator. And we get to talk to a lot of really talented people on the show, but what I'm so impressed by is how worldly his mind is. It definitely comes across in the work, but when you speak to him, it's like, wow, you really think a lot and you've experienced a lot and you've got well thought out thoughts about the world that we live in and how you translate that into your work. Love Rob.
Tyler, are we live? I don't
hold on
see it
one
on my
second.
end.
I don't see it on my end either. 1 second. It says it's live on Streamlabs. Let's see.
Yeah, because it still
Do
says
we-
waiting.
Yeah, it says waiting for me too.
Okay, 1 second. Let me end it and try it again.
You have to pay to join? We don't, do we?
You do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be a channel member.
Shit.
It should be.